So in other areas where the war was going on, of course there were areas of brothels and stuff, right? As the Nazis came through, they literally rounded up as many women. I can't, this is just it's disgusting. So young girls, and women up to the ages of 30 were rounded up and all taken to these concentration camps, which were known as sex camps. And this isn't talked about. It's not something that we often see in documentaries and other things. But let's just be clear that this was a very horrible time, and these women were molested, tortured, maimed, experimented on, murdered, and worked literally to death. My grandfather was actually in World War II, and he never talked about this. And it's we don't have really clarification on this right now, but it's been said that he was a part of actually liberating a women's concentration camp. And the more I have done research, so I can't confirm this because he never talked about it, and my grandfather has passed. But there's, and then finding out things that he was involved in and that he survived. There's no wonder why he didn't talk about it. And then it goes back to other things of why other people of that era don't talk about what happened when they were there. And in finding out this research, just no wonder why. It is, again, it's very difficult to talk about. And I mean, you can see this viscerally bothers me. But horrible things were done. And this was all deemed because some of these women that were rounded up were actually prostitutes. They worked in brothels that were legal at the time. And then when Hitler came through and decided that he was going to make the proclamation that prostitution would then be banned. This is the hypocritical part, right? You're going to ban it, but then you're going to create a sex camp for soldiers, and the upper echelon of the SS could come in at any time and do whatever they wanted to these women. It's disgusting and heartbreaking. If I am going to cover this in any more depth, I'm literally going to need more time and get my mind right, because this is very difficult for me to talk about, and it should be for anybody to cover and talk about, because this is horrific. It's horrific. So moving on. In France, during the German occupation, oh my gosh, it is I want to say, again, like, I don't know German, but I think it is called the Wehrmacht. WEHRMACHT. Promoted and organized brothels strictly for officers and Gestapo, and other brothels were, we'll say, enlisted for soldiers, of just regular enlisted soldiers. So they ban prostitution. Hitler bans prostitution, right? He makes it literally a crime. And then he turns around, makes these camps, and then through occupied France, he comes through and makes these brothels for high up officers and Gestapo. And then he also creates brothels for just enlisted soldiers. Okay. Now, all of these, can we even call them prostitutes at this time? Are they prisoners of war? That's what I see them as, prisoners of war, because that's what they were. They weren't there of their own free will. Anyone who happened to be involved in any of the brothels, or who actually ran the brothels allowed by occupied territory, right? Were then later on condemned by the community as sympathizers. And this goes into a very muddy area, because what do? You either, at that point in time, you did what you had to do to survive and to make sure that you made it out, right? And if not, you were put into a camp, tortured, experimented on, murdered, or worked to death, which is the same thing in my opinion. So there you go. Like, how sad for the people who ran these organizations, the brothels, to then be later on marred with the stigma of being a sympathizer, when they might necessarily not have been, but if they hadn't have done what they had done, they would have been tortured, maimed, murdered. So it's a really muddy area. We can't call it black and white. We can't call it gray. It was just a muddy area. All of the people who were involved and the women that they had in these brothels were subject to regular health screenings to make sure that they were not passing on disease. I guess that's about the only positive thing that we can say happened during this period of time. To the end of World War II, the consensus was that prostitution was out of control and ruining reputation of the people of France. And venereal disease was running rampant, and it was very difficult to also put a prohibition on brothels, because you still have soldiers from all over who were fighting the war and everything, who were still attending them, because there were like underground brothels and those types of things. And then the other just horrors, the horrors of war. So since many brothels had been occupied by Nazis, again, like I said, they were all seen as collaborators, as sympathizers. And most of those people after the war were either murdered or ostracized from their community. And then, of course, you have the end of the war, and then everybody spread to the wind. American soldiers came home. People from all over the world who were fighting in the war, they went home, and then it left just this, I mean, as if there wasn't enough damage already created, right? There was this damage that really just never recovered. And in some areas where this would have been seen as completely legal and profitable and a good thing for the economy and the community, it was no longer seen as such because it had the stigma on it. There's a lot to cover in France alone, and since it's so broad, I will definitely hit on that later. But that's just some of what was going on in the late 30s and 40s. Those were pretty much like the big things, you know. Like I said, that's just it's a very difficult conversation to have and to cover, and there are so many critics on the Holocaust alone and the atrocities that actually happened. Some say that it never happened, some say that it did happen. We all know it did. It's history. You can't change history. It's just what it is, right? And it was horrible. I'm not taking away from the other concentration camps where they had male and female together, and the other really just terrible, horrible things that happened there. But I'm not covering that. This was strictly on prostitution. Again, it's a very hard topic to discuss because it hits the heart. And if it doesn't hit your heart, I don't know what to say to you. So anyway, this was a more difficult topic to cover. My next episode, we are going to cover our top 10 madams and prostitutes. Some people considered all of these women to be madams and prostitutes, or prostitutes and then madams. But regardless, we're gonna cover them anyway, and we have some doozies, and some of you may recall them because they are in our time. So I will talk to you all soon. Again, if you like what I'm doing here, please do me a favor, subscribe, and I will see you in the next episode, my loves. Have a good day.